creepy fires, vampires, creepy crawling, bug infested eye, on some outer space, corpses come to life. Schizophrenic maniac attacking with a bloody knife. Science with the drums, got a blade that's 2 feet long. Pierces through his lovely wife, he bits the so long.
When a group of film students decide to host a horror movie marathon, they soon realize that their event has turned into a real nightmare when a movie-loving cult leader seemingly comes back from the dead. This movie is full of twists and turns, and its use of comedy intermingled with madness makes for a truly entertaining film. So grab your popcorn and get ready for a wild ride as we delve into the world of popcorn. A girl named Maggie has a nightmare of a little girl walking into a room filled with smoke. She sees a man calling the name Sarah over and over before he raises a twisted knife and Maggie wakes up. Maggie's interested in being a filmmaker and thinks her dreams would make a good script, so she records each one to add to her ever-growing story. Her school's film class has decided to set up an event at a local theater. The students here make up most of the main cast of the movie, so to name them off, we've got Toby, Bud, Cheryl, Tina, Leon, and Joni. While most of the guys seem to have the same barber, it's clear that they're all inspired by the wonderful haircut of their teacher, Mr. Davis. They want to do an all-night horror-thon using old films that used physical gimmicks and gags. These films are in direct homage to movie gimmicks popularized in the late 60s and 70s, with the most famous director among this group being William Castle. Castle had a handful of films and usually added these physical elements to allow his audience to be included in the films in one way or another. The most famous of his gimmicks were buzzers in the audience's seats for the 1959 movie The Tingler, lickable lottery tickets for a chance to win real-life prizes in 1963's 13 Frightened Girls, seats installed with seat belts and small electrodes to shock sections of the audience in 1965's I Saw What You Did, and my favorite of all, a full section of the theater for people called the Coward's Corner, where audience members who were too afraid to see the film's climax could go to get their money back, but they'd have to sing a small mantra saying, "I am a bona fide coward," in the 1961 movie Homicidal. While none of the films in Popcorn are real, they definitely take real-life inspiration, as they plan to use these physical props, including a giant mosquito that flies over the audience, fog machines set up with smells that they call stenchorama, and, taking a page from Castle himself, electrified seats to shock some of the audience members. To make this project possible, Toby asks for help from a man called Dr. M, who owns a local prop shop in town. He's a bit of an eccentric type, but he has a real passion for film and all the equipment that they'll need to make the films really pop, so none of the students really mind that he's a bit weird. And while I thought he was going to be very important in this movie, he's actually gone after this scene. He never shows up again, so that's Dr. M. In a quick montage, we see the class setting up the theater with realistic, nasty smells, seats that have the ability to shock the audience, and the giant mosquito. They also all get their costume set for the big debut.
I look like a snow cone.
Inside of Dr. M's things, they find an old film reel. Curiosity gets the better of them, and they decide to give it a watch, and what they see is bizarre. An extreme close-up of a man shows, and he repeats, "I am the possessor," over and over. When the film zooms out, Maggie recognizes the man in the film as the same man from her dreams, and she inexplicably faints. When she comes to, Mr. Davis gives an exposition dump on the short film. It was, not surprisingly, called The Possessor, and was made by a man who led a film cult when Mr. Davis was younger. He shot the full film, but left out the final scene and instead performed that part live on stage.
He murdered his family in front of the audience. Set fire to the theater, locked the doors.
They give the film back to Dr. M, and they split for the night. When Maggie gets home, she asks her mother if she knew anything about the possessor, and her mother gets really disturbed. She brushes it off, but when Maggie goes to bed, her mother gets a phone call from a man who claims to be the possessor himself. The voice tells her to go to the theater so that they can talk. Her mother does exactly that, bringing a pistol for safety. The possessor film is on screen when she enters, but it suddenly shuts off, leaving her in darkness. She hears someone run around the room and shoots at an approaching silhouette. She thinks that she's safe, but suddenly 2 arms break through the back wall and pull her off stage. When Maggie wakes up the next morning, there's a note that was apparently left by her mother, so she doesn't ask any questions about the disappearance. The night of the horror-thon has arrived, and people show up in troves, most of them coming in fun little costumes.
Excuse me. Pardon me.
Maggie's boyfriend Mark shows up, but oopsie daisy, he's brought a date. Maggie doesn't dwell on this too much, as this creepy man suddenly shows up as well and calls her Sarah before running into the theater. Maggie gives chase, but loses him as the first movie of the night starts. The first film is Mosquito, a movie about a giant mosquito running rampant through an old town. And look how fun this effect is. Maggie runs to the projector booth to tell Toby that she thinks the man behind the Possessor film is still alive, but she seems kind of excited with the idea because it would be a great addition for her script. Toby leaves Maggie in the booth so that he can go check things out for her, but he ends up getting locked outside. During the climax of Mosquito, a large practical prop of the mosquito is sent over the audience. However, as it turns around, Mr. Davis loses control of it, and we see a mysterious figure using a remote control to override his control. The bug rushes back to the backstage where it impales Mr. Davis and gives us the first kill of the film. The creepy man from before hobbles up and drags Mr. Davis's body away, and we see him make a mold of Mr. Davis's face to wear as his own. You know what's more important than death though? Relationship drama. Mark finds Maggie in the projector booth and he tries to explain himself. Toby stumbles in the middle of their conversation and says that he had to climb over fences and outrun a guard dog thanks to whoever shut the door and locked him out of the theater. Maggie walks off in a huff and Mark leaves shortly after her. But when he gets back, his date of the night has already found a new man. The next film to play is The Attack of the Amazing Electrified Man. Bud is manning the seat electrifiers and asks Tina to go find Mr. Davis to help him out. When Tina gets backstage, she sees Mr. Davis, but we know it's not really him, it's actually just a dude wearing a Mr. Davis mask. As Tina heads back to the Raptors? Hold on. I just realized my script had an autocorrect on it, and it changed rafters to rafters. I was so confused for a second, sorry about that. As Tina heads up to the rafters, Bud starts shocking the audience, causing screams to drown out anything that might happen backstage, including raptors. Tina begins to smooch the not Mr. Davis, and when she pulls away, the mask sticks to her face and reveals a burnt and disfigured man. Maggie is still kind of wandering around the theater with Mark chasing after her, and she goes backstage to see Tina for a moment, but it's just the killer puppeting her. It's a pretty funny scene, and in the end Mark just goes, man, Tina's really not looking so good.
Tina should start eating better. She looks like
Baba Booey.
Disguised now as Tina, the killer wanders up to Bud and he ties him up and places wires on his head. He attaches it to the electrocuting panel, and a few moments later, Bud gets barbecued. Mark and Maggie end up making up, but when Bud gets shocked, the lights go out, so they grab Cheryl and go to try and find Bud to see if he knows what's happened. Mark falls down the stairs, and Cheryl goes to grab him, meaning that Maggie is now alone when she gets to the electric panel, and she sees not Bud, but the killer sitting in his wheelchair. The story really starts to progress from here, so spoilers ahead. The man says that he is Maggie's father and continuously calls her Sarah, but she runs away as memories and odd images flash through her mind. In one memory, she sees herself on stage when her mother shoots the possessor in the back and carries her off as everything bursts into flames. Maggie runs directly into Toby and she tells him everything that she's beginning to remember.
Toby, he's my father.
She says that the possessor is back to kill her and finish his film, and Toby seems to actually believe her. The first step in helping is getting the lights back on, so Toby leads the way to the fuse box. Unfortunately, he falls down the staircase because everyone is just super clumsy in the dark, and when Maggie calls after him, Toby doesn't answer. She picks up a flashlight just as the burned killer grabs her from behind. He takes her to the makeup room before revealing who he really is.
I'm Toby. Or nearly Toby. You'll have to forgive the sloppy craftsmanship.
That's right, Toby has been the killer the entire time, and he's mastered the ability to change his face, even incorporating a voice changer to sound like a different sex when he needs to. A couple things I noticed while rewatching is, in a few scenes you can see the killer's silhouette, and it really does look just like Toby. And also, when they're setting everything up in the original montage for the theater, it's Toby who's helping to cast the faces for everyone's disguises. So there's fun little clues that help you guess who the killer actually is. Maggie asks Toby what he's doing, and he reveals that he was caught in the fire that the possessor, Maggie's father, started. He was just a child at the time, and he watched as his mother died, and he got severely burned in the process. So now he wants revenge after years of surgeries and torment that his injuries has forced on him.
You're crazy.
What? This just dawned on you? That's great. And I'm the one who's crazy.
He now wants to recreate the original viewing of the possessor, but make it go as planned, because in his own delusional world, that will set things right and make his mother come back to life. Like, Maggie's right, he's really actually crazy. Toby reveals that he's also got Maggie's mother, who is, it turns out, actually her aunt, and that he will finish them both off at midnight. He's got a bit of time to kill, so he rushes out to kill. He disguises himself as Leonard and then locks the real Leonard in a bathroom stall. He ends up killing the boy using a noxious stench bomb that explodes after a few seconds. Once the lights pop back on, the final film of the night begins. This one is The Stench, and it's complete with real smells pumped through the vents as the film progresses. There's not a whole lot to say about this one, but it's a fun little movie and a pretty cool idea. Mark goes looking for Maggie and hears that she was last seen with Toby. He ends up going to Toby's apartment, where he sees newspapers of the theater fire and articles all about Maggie and her mother. He puts the clues together and runs back to the theater as fast as he can. Midnight strikes, and the stench suddenly cuts to the possessor.
I hate this movie. Yeah, thumbs down on this movie. I hate this movie. Hate this movie.
Toby goes backstage and drugs Maggie before placing her inside of a metallic dress. He sets the stage and is ready for his final scene. The screen goes up, but when Maggie screams for help, the audience thinks that it's all part of the show and they begin to cheer. He starts a countdown from 30 and raises his blade to sacrifice Maggie. Fortunately, Mark has made it back to the theater just in time. He ziplines onto the stage, but knocks over some equipment, which knocks the mosquito loose. The giant bug then flies directly at Toby, impaling him and causing his body to swing back and forth in front of the cheering crowd. With Toby dead, we cut to a little while later where the police arrive and take some statements, and Mark holds Maggie, giving Popcorn a happy ending. At least for the people who lived. I think Popcorn is a true gem in the horror genre. Like, it's unique and captivating, and the sprinkle of self-aware meta-commentary is a nice homage to horror classics. The story's twists and turns were fun to try and predict, and while on paper it would seem like a really serious plot, the fact that the movie doesn't take itself too serious made it really entertaining. Popcorn serves as a reminder of the magic that can be found in cult classics, and along the way, I think it's become a cult classic itself. I think it was really ahead of its time, but there's no doubt in my mind that horror enthusiasts will watch and cherish it for the foreseeable future. But you gotta watch out for those raptors, I guess, man. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment down below with some of your favorite horror classics. But until next time, you stay safe out there. Bye-bye.
You're crazy.
What? This just dawned on you? That's great. And I'm the one.